There's a phrase you've heard your whole life if you grew up in this country. Golf widow. It's said at parties, at country club brunches, in sitcoms from the 70s. It's said with a laugh, the kind of laugh that isn't quite a laugh. And every man who plays this game has heard it directed at his own wife at some point. And every one of us has done the same thing in response. We smiled. We shrugged. We said something like, "Yeah, she's a saint," and we believed the joke. I tell myself this lie too, that the reason I'm on the course 4 hours every Saturday is because I love the game. Because I'm competitive. Because I need a break. Because, and this is the one I never say out loud, because being at home is harder than being out here. That's the lie. Or at least, that's the version of the lie we're allowed to say. The fuller version goes like this. Men play golf to escape their wives. Men play golf because they're selfish. Men play golf because 5 hours away from the house is easier than 5 hours of presence inside of it. The course is the bar without the shame. The man cave with grass. That's the story we tell. That's the story sitcoms tell. That's the story the wives tell each other at the Sunday brunch we're not at. And here's the cost of that story. The man who hears it long enough starts to believe it about himself. He starts to think his wanting to go to the course is a moral failure. He apologizes for it. He overcompensates the rest of the week. He buys flowers on the way home. He doesn't quite know why he feels guilty, but he does. And the wife, she keeps using the word widow. She uses it as a joke, but she means something by it. She has noticed something about her husband that he hasn't noticed about himself. She's not wrong to call herself a widow. She's just wrong about what's died. The conventional answer here is simple. It's the answer every magazine column and every advice podcast and every relationship therapist will give you. It goes like this. The man is avoiding intimacy. The man is regressing into adolescent leisure. The man is prioritizing his hobby over his household. The course is the symptom. The marriage is the patient. Fix the man, fix the marriage. I've read this advice in maybe 100 places. It sounds right. It feels right. The wives nod at it. The therapists nod at it. The men shrug at it because they don't know how to argue back. There's only one problem. It doesn't explain what actually happens out here. If you've never played golf, you might assume the men out there are talking the whole time. They're not. A 4-hour round contains, by my count, maybe 40 minutes of actual conversation. Most of it is logistics. What club? Did you see it? Nice shot. Your honor. But there's something else happening out there that you can't see from the parking lot. It happens in the gaps. The walk between shots. The pause at the tee while someone else hits. The slow ride from green to next tee box. Those are the moments where, sometimes, a man will say something he has not said anywhere else in his life. He'll mention his father's diagnosis. He'll mention that his daughter isn't speaking to him. He'll mention that he hasn't slept well in 2 months. He'll mention it once. Quietly. Eyes forward. And his friend, also eyes forward, will say something short back. And then they'll keep walking. And then they'll hit their next shot. That is the thing happening on the course. That is what the wives sense. That is what the men can't name. In Hanginle, Heimriba, the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, released a public health advisory. The subject wasn't smoking. It wasn't obesity. It was loneliness. He called it an epidemic. He compared its mortality effect to smoking roughly 15 cigarettes a day. The numbers inside that report are not gentle. Americans have fewer close friends than they did 30 years ago. The decline is sharpest among men. A growing number of men in middle age report having 0 close confidants. Not few. 0. Robert Putnam was tracking this 2 decades earlier. His book, Bowling Alone, wasn't really about bowling. It was about the slow erosion of the spaces. Leagues, lodges, churches, unions, neighborhood card games, where Americans, especially American men, used to be in unstructured proximity with other Americans. Those spaces are mostly gone now. Niobe Way, a developmental psychologist at NYU, spent decades interviewing boys about friendship. She found something most of us don't expect. Boys, into their early teens, talk about their male friends in language that sounds almost romantic. They use the word love. They describe their best friend as the person who knows their soul. And then around 15 or 16, something shuts off. The culture tells them that kind of closeness between men is suspect, so they bury it. They keep the friends, sometimes, but the language of closeness disappears. And often, the closeness disappears with it. Richard Reeves, in Of Boys and Men, puts the numbers next to the story. Men's social networks shrink dramatically through their 30s and 40s. By 50, the average American man has a smaller circle of confidants than at almost any point in his adult life. He has coworkers. He has acquaintances. He has, if he's lucky, his wife. And sometimes that's it. So now look at the golf course again. 4 men. 5 hours. No phones in pockets. No screens. No agenda. No transaction. No one trying to sell anyone anything. They walk side by side, which is, as anyone who's raised a teenager knows, the only configuration in which a man will actually talk about what matters, not face to face. Side by side. Eyes forward. Here's the thing nobody on tour will say out loud. The thing nobody in the magazine columns will say. The thing the relationship therapists miss because they've never been part of a Saturday foursome. Golf is, for millions of American men, the only remaining socially sanctioned container for unstructured, non-transactional intimacy with other men. That's the sentence. Read it again. Unstructured. No agenda. No deal to close. Non-transactional. Nobody is paying anybody. Intimacy. Real, slow, side-by-side intimacy. The kind that happens in the gaps. For 5 hours, no one will text him about a project. No one will ask him to be productive. No one will require him to be a provider, or a problem solver, or a father, or a husband. He gets to just be a man in a pair of soft spikes, walking down a fairway with 3 other men who require nothing of him. The bar can't do this. Too loud. Too short. Too lubricated. The office can't do this. Everything there is transactional. Church, for some men, used to do this. For most men now, it doesn't. The neighborhood bowling league did this once. It's mostly gone. The Saturday pickup basketball game did this once. Knees gave out around 40. What's left, for an enormous number of American men in middle age, is the golf course. Sometimes the fishing trip. Sometimes the deer stand. But for most the course. And so, on Saturday morning, when the man tells his wife he's going to the course, he is not primarily escaping her. He doesn't know this. He cannot articulate it. If you asked him, he'd say he loves the game. He'd say he loves competition. He'd say he loves the outdoors. All true. But underneath all of that, mostly invisible to him, is the fact that the course is where he goes to not be alone. He cannot say that. The culture has not given him the language to say that. So he says, I'm going to the course. And his wife hears, I'm going to escape. And both of them are speaking accurate translations of a sentence neither of them can say plainly. I've been part of a foursome for 15 years now. Same 4 guys. We've buried 2 parents between us. We've watched one marriage end. We've watched another barely survive. One of us got sober. One of us had a cancer scare. One of us, I won't say, which sat in his car in the parking lot last winter for 45 minutes before our tea time, crying about something he has still never named out loud to anyone, including, on most days, himself. We've never had a single conversation that anyone would call deep. And there is no one else on earth I'd rather walk 18 with. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. The course stops looking like an escape. It starts looking like infrastructure. The last piece of male emotional infrastructure most American men have left. And the phrase golf widow, that phrase the wives have been using for 50 years, starts to land differently. She is not, it turns out, widowed to the game. She's widowed to a culture that handed her husband one container and called him selfish for using it. She's widowed to the fact that he can't tell her about his father's diagnosis. Not because he doesn't love her. He does. Often desperately. But because something in him learned, around age 16, that the language of vulnerability is not safe to speak in most rooms. And the only place that rule loosens, the only place where, with eyes forward and a 6-iron in his hand, he might let one true sentence out is on the Bythe fairway with a man he's known for 25 years. She knows this. The wives almost always know this. At times, they sense it the way you sense weather. They can't quite name it, but they know. That's why the joke isn't quite a joke. Last summer, I played around with a friend I've known since college. He's 53, built like a fence post. Hasn't cried, that I know of, since Mokngin Chin Chum Chin Witam on the Bythe hole long par 4, slight dogleg right between his approach shot and the green. He told me his father had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He hadn't told his wife yet. He hadn't told his sister. He hadn't told his therapist, who he's seen for 11 years. He told me. Mid-round, on the walk from the fairway to the green, eyes forward. Voice almost normal. I said, "I'm so sorry, brother." He said, "Yeah, we hit our next shots." He two-putted for par. We walked to the 10th tee. We have not spoken about it since, and I have thought about it almost every day. What happened there is not avoidance. What happened there is the opposite. What happened there is the single most intimate moment two men can have in 21st century America, and it happened because the structure of the game, the walking, the gaps, the side-by-side, the permission of the 4 hours, gave him a container that nothing else in his life could give him. If we had been at a restaurant, he would not have said it. If we had been on the phone, he would not have said it. If we had been on a couch with a therapist, he might have said it eventually. But not that day. Not that early. Not without crying. On the Bythe fairway, with a wedge in his hand and a slight breeze and 3 hours of walking still ahead of us, he said it. And then he was allowed to keep moving. He didn't have to sit in it. He didn't have to be looked at. He could say the true thing, and then immediately hit a golf ball, and that golf ball would take him 140 yards forward, and the saying of it would be over. Golf gave him an escape hatch from the conversation he just started. That is not a bug. That is the whole point. That is why this game survives in a culture that has stopped tolerating slow things. Because in slowness, men say true things. So the next time you hear the phrase golf widow, listen for what's underneath it. Listen for the cost. Not just to her. To him. She's not widowed to the game. He's not escaping the marriage. They're both inside a culture that, for 100 small reasons, gave him one room in his whole adult life with a door he could close behind him, and 3 friends inside, and 5 hours, and a wedge in his hand. And it asked him to feel guilty for using it. Bobby Jones said golf is played on a 5.5-inch course, the space between the ears. Sometimes it's also played in the 4 inches between you and the man walking next to you. That's the part nobody wrote down. If you're new here, this channel, The Inner Lie, is about the space between what we tell ourselves about this game and what's actually true underneath. No tips. No tricks. No promises of a lower handicap. Just honest looks at the numwe inches. If that's a thing you want more of, you can subscribe. We'll see each other again. I'm glad you're here.